Hello, I'm Palmeira, and I will be following up on Marta's introduction, and I'll be presenting a few results of the NoHoW project. So I will be focusing mostly on the motivational and self-regulatory skills mediation processes that may be happening in explaining how the NoHoW project was associated with weight change. First of all, just to recall the logic model that Marta just mentioned. So of all this very complex model, we will be focusing mostly on body weight and weight change. And specifically, I would like you to focus on the high level of variability that we have experienced in the NoHoW, with some people were able to gain about 30 kilos while others were able to lose about 30 kilos. So there was a lot of variability going on, and this variability is very interesting to study how these logic models and these mechanisms of action may have been occurring. Regarding our methods, what we did was we tried to create variables for each one of the logic model concepts, let's say, and we developed, let's say, a more simplified model, but in a sense it has a few variables here that are the input variables, then some baseline to intervention and variables that was baseline to 6 months, and then baseline to 12 months, that was when we measured the primary outcome, that was weight change. We used M+ to do most of our analysis, and our sample was composed of 870 participants that were with us for the full length of the year of the NoHoW trial. So let's look into the results. Firstly, we will show the results with the full sample, and for that we will firstly look also to some more simple correlations. And what we have noticed was that the logic models kind of predicted what happened in our data. So you can see the blue bars are the ones that are significant, and when we have a negative correlation, means that the improvements in these variables were associated with decreases on weight. And so we see that action plans, the autonomous processes, autonomous motivation processes, the satisfaction of psychological needs were associated with the best results. That was kind of a simpler, as I mentioned, analysis. If we now look into the multivariate analysis that we have conducted with M+, we can see here that we have the model that we created, so by the intervention, the baseline to intervention, then the baseline to 12 months, and then weight change. And we can see also all the significant effects in these paths, in these arrows between variables. Again, the logic model kind of was fitted to our data. We had 23.5% of weight change variance explained by this model with an excellent model fit, and most of everything worked as planned, with the exception of the behavior regulation variables that were not linked to weight change as expected, and also as the main point of our analysis, we noticed that the self-regulatory processes were the ones that were more were stronger in terms of their associations with weight change. But even with that complexity of the previous figure, it didn't present the indirect effects. So here is a summary of those indirect effects. So remember that the logic model predicted that climate care, need satisfaction, and goal content were part of the mechanisms of action supporting better weight regain prevention via the self-regulatory skills. And this is what we have observed. So the improvements in these variables led to better self-regulatory skills, which led to improved weight regain prevention, so as expected. Let's see one example of how this worked out in our analysis. So looking into climate care specifically, we have noticed that there is no direct path between climate care and weight change, but there is a few indirect effects that run from climate care improving action plans, or improving coping plans, or improving action control, and via those improvements they will be improving weight change. The same happened with goal content, so improvements in goal content were associated with better weight change via the self-regulatory skills, while need satisfaction, we also observed what is called a partial mediation. So we had both a direct effect of need satisfaction on weight change, but also these indirect effects that we observed in the previous figure. So after this, what we done was we looked into some group results. So we divided the sample in losers, the ones that lost more than 3% of their weight, maintainers, and then regainers, the one that regained more than 3%. And we ran the same analysis. And just from the start, what we can see is that there are more mechanisms of action that are significant on regainers than on losers. So it seems that when everything is good, there are not many mechanisms of action that were detected via our questionnaires and via our analysis, so just one mechanism of action. While when we look at the regainers that maybe are scrambling to find solutions, we found 6 mechanisms of actions that were significant. So this will pave the way to our discussion. And our discussion will start by stating that I hope that you can help me and our team to figure it out what may be happening here. So we're going to present a few ideas and we will love to hear your comments in your disagreements or agreements. So first, to state the obvious, the logic, the models are always wrong, but some are useful. Our specific logic model explained about a quarter of the variance, meaning that 75% of the variance are unknown. So can we make something useful from those 25%? So let's first look at a beautiful metaphor created by Jonathan Haidt. It is a dual process model similar to Hoffman's or Kahneman's System 1 and System 2 models, and this metaphor is named the elephant and the rider. And Jonathan Haidt states that the rider represents the conscious processes, the cognitive efforts to find pros and cons, using information explicitly, so a very slow and demanding process. While the elephant represents our intuitions, older physiological drives that are automatic, much faster, and use less of our conscious energy, let's say. So most of our day-to-day actions are linked with the elephant rather than to the rider, who sometimes struggles to drive the elephant, especially when information is kind of dubious. And by the way, do you eat carbs or don't you eat carbs? Or do you do high intensity interval training, or do you do walking just for weight loss? So you see where we are going to. So how can we use this elephant and the rider metaphor? We will use Dom's review, so our discussant, from 2016, and she suggested that there are 5 maintenance topics that we should look into when we are looking into maintenance of behavior change. Firstly, we can say that this process, that there are processes that are above the water, so more conscious, more linked with the rider. They are visible and measurable via questionnaires. And I will say that these are the maintenance motives, high above in our conscious. Habits and other automaticity related processes are below the water, so I would say subconscious. While self-regulatory skills may be floating around in the surface of the water. I also would say that the resources and the environmental and social influences that are the other maintenance topics are the water itself, but feel free to trash me on that. So now imagine all the people. An elephant and the rider swimming. So in my mind, wearables will be providing a steady stream of data, always available, feeding self-regulatory skills such as the action plans and the coping plans and so on. So feeding the elephants. These I will speculate, are less conscious processes, and it will afford the development of habits and automaticity, priming the elephants, the under the water mechanisms, that are difficult to tap via questionnaires. On the other hand, above the water, are the digital content of apps that are usually aiming at the maintenance motives. These are directed to the rider. And I would expect that the questionnaires that we use are able to grasp these motivational processes. Because they are operating at a more conscious level. If we imagine this possibility, then digital behavior change interventions may be designed with these processes in mind. So feeding wearable data, feeding constant stream of data will be aiming at the elephant, while the content of the app will be aiming at the maintenance motives and potential self-regulation. So this top-down content will be feeding the rider, the app content, while the constant stream of data coming from the wearables, the scales, will potentially help the elephant to develop better mechanisms to prevent weight regain. Well, but there's a lot of John Lennon Imagine around here, so enough. I'll be looking forward to hear from your comments and your agreements and disagreements in this discussion. Goodbye.